and gentlemen, welcome in. It is round 7 of the National Finals Rodeo. This is No Huddle Rodeo presented by Virgin Hotels and coming to you from the Virgin Hotel in Las Vegas. We're also brought to you in part by Justin Boots and Runyon's Fine Furniture. And last night was crazy. We talked about it. The dust had kind of settled. I think we're all past it. No real reverberations from what happened. Obviously, a lot of chatter on social media from both contestants, fans. The PRCA gave a statement basically saying the call is the call and we stand by our replay system, and that's kind of where it is done on the topic of Stetson Wright in round 6 of the National Finals Rodeo. So let's go right to round 7. And in round 7, the theme now is the projected world standings. You have heard me harping on it really since round 4, but once we get to this point, 7 of 10 rounds, the average standings, or at least the pecking order, has kind of been established, which means that 94,000, incredibly important this year and every year. But again, we need to start factoring that in when we talk about these races. And so in the bareback riding, crucially, it comes into play in that race right away, because if you look at things on paper, Rocker Steiner, who did not get a check once again tonight, he leads by $102,000 over Sam Peterson. He leads by $135,000 over Wacey Schalla, but Wacey Schalla leads the average. Rocker dropped 3 spots in the average tonight, so their average checks are Wacey's in position for about $94,000, Rocker's in position for about $23,000. And so what does that do to those projected world standings when you factor it in? Well, that cuts the lead for Rocker down to about $64,000 over Wacey Schalla, which with 3 rounds still to go is a pretty considerable lead. But the big but there is Rocker needs to stay in that average. He needs to either go up or stay put at that $23,000 for that 6th place spot in the average. Otherwise, this gets really troublesome really quick, especially if Wacey stacks more checks and Rocker doesn't get any. So still a lot of ways to go, but if you're looking at this on paper and you just look at the world standings and you say, oh, okay, Rocker Steiner's up by $102,000 with 3 rounds to go. He's got this. He's the world champion. That is not the case. There is still a good chance Rocker is your world champion. That is still what I would bet on here in Las Vegas, but it is not nearly as close as it looks on paper. A little bit different in the steer wrestling, because in the steer wrestling, it still looks like Will Loomis and Tucker Allen are in a dead heat. But Tucker Allen, who is 4-2 today, he gets second in the round. So he's 4-2. Rowdy Parrott wins the round at 4 flat. So he is second in the round at 4-2. He leads the average. And so if it ended today, Tucker Allen would be your world champion by about $65,000. So think about that. Go look at the actual world standings, and then look at the steer, or do it in bareback riding, do it in the steer wrestling. Look at the actual world standings in both events, and then look at what would happen if you factored in the projected totals. And it's completely different, because it looks like Will Loomis has a good chance to win the world title. But in reality, in the projected standings, when you factor in the average, Tucker Allen and Rocker Steiner have about the same lead in their respective events. And so that's why I always harp on it. I always talk about it. It's so important, because you kind of get a false look at the standings at this point if you are only looking at the world standings. So look at the world standings for context, but look at the projected, look at the average. They matter a ton right now. In the team roping, that is where we are going next. Another very fast round. It took 3-9 to get a check, and the Graham brothers, the Canadian standouts, 3-5, they get it done. And in that world title race, no check for Summers and Corkill, but they are the only ones to catch all 7. And they've caught all 7 at a really fast pace. So they could probably afford a miss and still be top 2 or 3 in the average when this is all said and done. So by being a steer up, based on where they were in the world standings, if you look at the projected world standings, Clint Summers leads by about $40,000. Jade Corkill leads by about $30,000. Colton Schmidt and Jonathan Torres have risen all the way up to number 2 in those projected world standings. And if they move up in the average, like I said, they're about $30,000 and $40,000 behind respectively. If they move up in the average Every time someone misses, that could benefit them. And that gets really, really interesting, especially if Summers and Corkill move back even a spot or two. They can kind of meet in the middle there and see what happens in that race. Ward and Long still hanging around there in the mix. They got a check tonight. Tomlinson and Graves, your round winners last night. They are also still in the mix in the team roping. In the saddle bronc riding, Statler Wright, once again, 89 3/4 points. And after all the talk about Stetson as the projected world champion and Ryder coming in number 1, Statler Wright is right in this world title fight. And now we've really got a great world title fight between Zeke Thurston, Ryder Wright, and Statler Wright at this point. Zeke, great ride tonight, second in the round, 88.5 points. He split it with Stetson Wright. And so here is the state of play in the bronc riding, because this one's a little more hectic right now. So Zeke leads the average by 4.5 points over Statler Wright. He leads Statler Wright by about $40,000 in the projected world standings. The difference in number 1 and number 2 in the average is $94,000 to $76,000. So that's about $18,000. So if you think about it, if over the next 3 rounds, if you take the day money out of it, we don't know what's going to happen there. That is impossible to predict. If you take that out of it, and Statler Wright and Zeke Thurston switch places in the average, that's a $36,000 swing. That puts Statler Wright within $4,000 in the projected standings. Not to mention, Statler is number 3 in the projected standings. Number 2 is Ryder Wright. He's about $34,000 behind. So if Statler doesn't win himself a world title, he could rally and take $18,000 out of Zeke Thurston's pocket by winning that average, and then Ryder Wright could have a better chance down the stretch to win that world title. And something else too. So right now, Stetson number 9 in the average, Ryder number 10 on the average. They are the top 2 on 6. So if anyone in front of them bucks off, all of a sudden Stetson's getting an average check. If 2 guys buck off over the next 3 rounds and everything else stays the same, then Ryder gets an average check. So if Ryder were to get an average check and move up there, even if Zeke wins the average, that's still cutting into that lead. He can make it up in the day money. So if you didn't get all that, I understand. But basically, every time someone falls off in front of Stetson or Ryder, that is huge, more specifically for Ryder at that point. And any point that Statler Wright gets that is better than Zeke Thurston, that gets him closer and closer to a dead heat. So Statler can somehow erase this lead that Zeke Thurston has by round 10. It may just be best ride wins between Zeke, Ryder, and Statler for the gold buckle. So take a breath. None of that needs to be decided right now. I will do the same. There's still 3 rounds to go, but saddle bronc riding is probably the most confusing, and really it has become maybe the most fascinating race. The team roping very interesting as well with so many scenarios, but the saddle bronc riding race is really, really fascinating now. Tie down roping. That got a little less fascinating because Joel Harris wins the round again. He is so impressive in this arena. He has won 4 of the 17 go-rounds in his career at the Thomas and Maxwell. Almost 25% of the go-rounds in his young NFR career he has won. But most importantly, Riley Webb is second with a 7-8. That's a huge $29,000 check because Shad Mayfield is out of the money. And this is another argument of why those projected world standings matter so much. Because if you look at it, Riley takes the lead back. He leads by $23,000. So if you are just looking up the world standings, you go, oh, dang, this thing's really close. If Shad's top 2 in the round and Riley's out of the money tomorrow, we got a dead heat in rounds 9 and 10. How awesome is that? But Riley is your leader in the average. Shad is number 8 in the average. That is a difference of about $86,000. So if you take Riley's $23,000 lead, you add $86,000 to it, he's got a lead of about $110,000 theoretically on Shad Mayfield. So it's far from over, especially when the average looms so large in an event like tie-down roping where Riley could miss one and tumble all the way down. But to be frank, if Riley just ties his next 3 casts, Shad's going to have a tough time coming back. Basically, Shad needs to finish in the top 2 in every round if Riley were to do that. So if Riley does what he does in the NFR and he hasn't had a no time in his last 27 plus runs, then It's another one. It's 3 in a row for the first time since Roy Cooper. So we are getting closer and closer to Riley Webb winning another gold buckle. In the barrel racing, Haley Gibson Stillwell wins her first career go-around. Trisha Aldridge is second. Kassie Mowry third. Haley Kinsel fourth. But Kassie Mowry is in the prime position. The position that every athlete wants to be in right now are these 3 things when I list them off. Number 1 in the world standings, number 1 in the average standings, number 1 in the projected world standings. You're not going to have a whole lot of trouble if that is the case. Still some stuff that could happen, but the same way Riley Webb is in the driver's seat, Kassie Mowry is very much in the driver's seat to win another world title. Bull riding, 90.5 for TJ Gray. He's the only guy to ride. One of 2 guys to ride. Bryce Jensen also rides tonight. So 2 guys ride. They both take home over $50,000 in the round. And in the bull riding, Stetson Wright bucks off. And so Kai Hamilton also bucks off. And so it's still 5 bulls Kai, 4 bulls Stetson. Scary buck off for Stetson Wright. PRCA immediately released a statement. They said he is okay. He said no injury. He will be riding rounds 8, 9, and 10. And so that threw a wrench into things. I think there's a lot of people who thought, hey, maybe Stetson's going to have some issues. Maybe he won't be able to ride. That might open the door for someone. It does not. So although Stetson bucks off, still a big lead over Kai Hamilton. And because he is the best on 4 bulls, Kai's only got the edge by about $18,000 in that average. But before we go, I want to shout out how good these bull riders have been. Last year on 10, we only had 5 guys ride 4. Only 5 guys were 4 of 10 or better. This year through 7 rounds, we have 7 bull riders who are 4 of 7 or better. That includes 4 first-timers. So I was banging the drum about how much first-timers struggle here. That is not the case this year. We have 4 first-time NFR qualifiers who have covered 4 bulls. And like I said, 7 guys overall have done just that. But the overall sentiment, especially if he's still riding, is this is Stetson Wright's bull riding title to lose. Although we did see the ground money come into play, and there could be $62,000 for go rounds if only 2 guys ride again in the next few rounds. So bull riding always a little harder then, because there's some hairy situations that can come up again, especially if Kai Hamilton leads the average, because there's still a scenario where everyone else could buck off. Kai could win the average. He could ride in round 10, and he could win $194,000 on that last day. So still a long ways to go in the bull riding, but it's the same as the barrel racing and the tie-down roping. Stetson Wright is in the primary position there. That is round 7. We are closer and closer. We are heading to really what I consider the final weekend. More people coming into town. The energy comes back after that kind of midweek lull here. And so we are looking forward to it. Rounds 8, 9, and 10 before we say goodbye to the 2025 National Finals Rodeo. This has been No Huddle Rodeo presented by Virgin Hotels, coming to you from the Virgin Hotel in Las Vegas. Thank you again to them, and we'll see you tomorrow for round 8.